Do we,
So, I do it once. Okay, so we don't have our first bullet point, do we?
no, that was the.
We do,
that
I'm
was the-
sorry, I was.
That was the
trying to
first
help
one.
Caroline, so read it again.
Multiply multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place.
In decimals to the hundredths place.
Okay.
Right. Now,
Sorry.
do we see anything from, this kind of gets to, no, never mind, sorry, I was looking in the wrong place. Is there anything from any of the other standards that is like better, or that we want to pull in, or is that?
I just don't have California's open in front of me right now. I'm
Yeah,
looking
I
at the
need to
cross, I'm looking at the crossover one too,
California here.
and I don't have Massachusetts in
I
front
have
of me.
California in front of me.
I don't have that hard copy.
I'm gonna get California.
I can dig Massachusetts out, but I can't, I found yesterday I couldn't handle that many different documents. I got lost on which document I was looking at.
Well, and I know when you look at the
Let's see,
GOEs, they're
California-
the same thing.
California has, add, subtract, multiply, and divide with decimals, add with negative integers, which we're not talking about, at this point. So they do have add, subtract, multiply, and divide with decimals. Demonstrate proficiency with division, including division with positive decimals and long division with multi-digit divisors. Solve simple problems, including ones arising in concrete situations involving the addition, subtraction of fractions and mixed numbers. And then it gets into fractions, and we're,
It does, at that point.
yeah, then it goes
doesn't
to
go at another
yes.
point.
multiplication and division of fractions, and applying multiplication and division of fractions to solving problems. So those first three were the ones that had pieces about decimals. Let's see, fifth grade, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when we said, because we have multiply in its own standard now, do we want to have multiply, do we really want to break out and have a standard for add, multiply, subtract, or do we need to put them all in one place? So,
Can we do multiply and divide to
That's
the
what I was
hundredths
thinking.
place and add and subtract to the thousands?
Because that's families, so I would think you put multiply and divide together.
Multiply and divide, multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place, and then add and subtract the same thing, except thousands place. Does that sound like what we wanna do?
Yes.
so
So the first bullet, you're saying multiply and divide, multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place.
Is that what you have?
that's what I have.
And then the second one,
So,
and we might wanna switch the order of I would put add, subtract first, but the second one, add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the thousands place. Does that sound okay, Janet?
I'm sorry, I'm still getting more.
I'm sorry, it's all
Yes.
right. And they're bringing some paper copies, but
Okay.
this is new stuff.
yeah, so we're essentially continuing on what we were doing yesterday. We've shifted from Google Drive to Dropbox because it seems to be more user-friendly for people.
I need to have you just show me Google Drive. I can't get it to work. I can't get it to open.
The Google Drive.
So I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I'm not set up.
Do you have a Gmail account or a Google
Yeah,
account?
but I don't use them.
Yeah.
I had to set up another new password last week.
I still couldn't get in. So, I'm sorry, I'm a dinosaur, but, so this, you said, I missed it, add and subtract.
Multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the thousands place.
Yeah, we got.
So-
Stop, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
We're worried about the division not being specific on how to limit
I'm
the
thinking,
divisor.
yeah,
So we don't want them to have to divide by a 6-digit number.
when we're,
Right
we
now,
need
the
to
way
think
we
about
have
like a
it.
2-digit divisor is what we need to think about.
At the max.
At the max, it needs to be a
It could be a
2-digit,
1,
yes.
it could be 1, but it could also be 2. We,
Two's reasonable.
3 and 4
Yeah,
and
we-
thousands
so we
place.
want
So
a
we wanna
2-digit.
just multiply to the hundredths place? and then have a separate one
I
for
think-
divide?
I think we need to, so we can be specific.
Yeah, I didn't think about, I was thinking fact families, but then,
Okay.
just trying to make it short and sweet, but
I'm
you
no
can't be.
expert at that level. Okay, so how do we wanna say that then? Divide multi-digit whole numbers and decimals by, how do we wanna say
Two-digit
it?
divisor with the two-digit divisor.
Multiply. We
Do
still
wanna
want
limit the
multi-digit.
quotient, and do we wanna limit the dividend then, what? No, divide
By two-digit
multi-digit whole
divisor.
number and decimals.
With two-digit divisors.
Well, do we need to say single and two-digit or just two-digit? And that would apply that they would also just.
By no more than, by up to,
Up to.
by up to two-digit divisors. So that could let you divide by 23, or it could let you divide by 2 3/10, or it could let you divide by 65 hundredths.
So it's
That makes
limiting
sense
within
for
the
everybody?
limits, cause it's two-digit.
I mean, that's what it's saying, so is that what we want?
And back to, I don't know if Marilyn or Leslie said it, do we wanna limit the dividend too, so that they're not given something like this to divide?
Well, the one I'm looking at on the crossover does say, quotients of whole numbers, with up to 4-digit dividends and 2-digit divisors.
That's on the Glees, Missouri, or?
Well, it's the Missouri Mathematics Core Academic Standards Crosswalk. So it's the crosswalk version. So it tends to use a mix of that. But it is specifically laid out with, they have 4-digit dividends and 2-digit divisors for 5th grade.
What do you,
Yeah,
Okay, so.
let's see in the,
I hate being limiting, but I also know like the devil's advocate, if we don't limit, then we could be getting all kinds of, and that's what the standard says.
Right, so, go ahead, Myra.
the Glees specified and said, our old Glees. Apply and describe the strategy used to compute a division problem up to a 3-digit by 2-digit. And then it says, and addition and subtraction of fractions and decimals. So, yeah. I'm not saying put it all together, I'm just saying that they're specifying a 3-digit by 2-digit.
For multiplication, right?
No, that was a division problem.
And they said it by, 3-digit by,
That's what it
2-digit.
says on paper. All I can do is read it.
It implies multiplication.
I'm sorry. So what do we wanna do? Divide, we're still working on divide, right?
Yeah, cause this one, it says find whole number quotients of whole numbers, it doesn't say decimals, with up to 4-digit dividends and 2-digit divisors. Using strategies based on place value, the properties of operations, and or the relationship between multiplication and division.
California didn't specify the size that I'm seeing. They just are doing it. Well, and they're specifically saying add, subtract, multiply, and divide with decimals, so I'm assuming there's whole numbers with that, but you could read into it that they're
Well,
only
because,
working.
because in 4th grade you do some
Right.
work with whole number.
And somebody's gonna come in and develop a test based upon these.
That's what I'm
Right.
afraid of. And it's not just like the testing company, even teachers or school districts might interpret it as, well, this fits with the standard because it doesn't say that it has to be a
Yeah, so when a
3-digit.
district makes up their common assessments, it's
Yeah.
fine, they stop that too.
Right.
Is that a problem other than just the sheer width of,
How big the numbers get or how small.
I mean, because once you start the process, really doesn't matter if you have 15 or
Right.
4.
Right.
the more
It's
you
just
have,
gonna, it's gonna be a one
Well,
sheet,
it does the
piece of
fifth
paper,
grade.
scratch paper, or.
It does matter to 5th grade kids,
Well, yeah.
yeah, like sitting at the kitchen table, I have 10 of these.
it gives them so many more opportunities to make one little mistake and get it
Sure.
counted wrong.
Well,
Yeah, it's right in the
I
middle
thought
of
the
it.
experts were
Once they
there
can
in
divide,
fifth
they can
grade,
divide.
so
Well,
whatever you guys think.
okay, 5th grade teachers,
What do you think?
call it.
So I have,
What do you think, Janet?
Well, surely they would give them credit for showing the process as well. If they see they've got the process
Yeah.
down, it's just one calculation area through them off.
We would hope, we would hope.
Right.
Well, I would think you wouldn't go above a 4-digit, dividend.
So
I would say 2-digit divisor is no more than a 2-digit divisor, and there's no reason to go above a 4-digit dividend, because there's no reason to give them a number that looks like this, to continue that process over and over.
Right.
Because
It's-
that's just gonna kill a 10-year-old.
Well,
There's no reason to kill the 10-year-old.
I mean, especially if you're using a standard method.
So
Then
glad
you,
you're saying that.
once you've got it for a certain number,
Yes.
it's the same process.
It's the same process.
Yeah.
So,
So-
if it's a 3-digit dividend or a 4-digit dividend, it's not really gonna matter.
Right.
But we don't wanna go beyond that in all honesty, so we just say that.
So I said divide multi-digit and whole numbers, not multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place using up to 2-digit divisors and 4-digit dividends.
Okay, slow down, go
So-
nice and slow,
Wow.
smart person.
Divide-
Say it again.
Divide multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place using up to 2-digit divisors and 4-digit dividends.
Up to 2-digit
Up to two.
Yeah, that's,
Up to divisors and 4-digit dividends.
yeah, that's what I had.
So we could have like 24 and 4800, 4-digit dividend. Yeah. I was trying to think like the 4 places and
Mhm.
hundreds plus.
Good place to clarify language too.
Mhm.
Right, multi-digit whole numbers and decimals for this class, using up to 2-digit divisors and 4-digit dividends.
Up to, so it's not saying they have to all be that way,
Right,
it's up
right.
to that. So, and that's a third separate one, so we still have multiply and divide multi-digit numbers and decimals to the hundredths place?
We took
And then we have
divide out of that,
Oh, you took divide out of that?
and
Yeah.
it's just
Okay.
multiply multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place.
Got it.
I thought the discussion was
Yeah, we
to
did, we took
separate
it
the
up,
two
yes,
out.
we did.
Did we need to say anything there about how many digits? I think that we're fine if we just say to the hundredths
We don't
place.
need no multiplication, because you're not gonna give a child. I
Right,
mean-
generally, if you have it on the division, that kind of forces the multiplication.
Sure. And then the third one we had was
Yeah,
add and,
subtraction.
Yes,
add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers and decimals to the thousandths place.
yeah.
Now, I would like to take that one and put it in the first position, because add and
I agree.
subtract is the earliest that
Yeah.
they do. and
Yeah,
then
that's
do the
what we'll do.
multiply
That,
and
that would be
divide.
the first thing you do is review all of that and then
Okay.
go into your multiplication and division. That would be a sequence of events, yeah.
Because you can't divide unless you can interact. It's gonna be a little difficult if you don't multiply.
I know.
There we go.
Division kind of pulls it
Okay.
all together.
Do we wanna say anything in here about variety of strategies or?
I like saying a variety of strategies. I don't necessarily like the way Common Core does it, where they say you must use concrete models or drawings.
Could we just say using a variety of strategies somewhere?
And even say, I would even be fine with saying e.g. standard algorithm, concrete models or drawings. I would be fine with doing something like that.
Well, I'm fine with even variety, like in our basic thing that says perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals to the hundreds using a variety of strategies. I think it has to be in there, that way they know that there's more than one way to compute these.
Right.
And the students need to know that they can do it. more
So
than
you're
one
saying
way.
just put it in the heading?
Put it in the heading, and then you don't have to put it into all those 3 different
Full
things.
numbers.
I think we just put it right in
With
the heading.
decimals, using
so
a,
The one concern would be, and I'm fine with that too, but I just want to toss this out as to think about. One concern would be if students were required to know all the, if there was a test that tried to say you have to do all these different
All those
ways.
crazy strategies.
Right, instead of just,
Okay, I hope there's nobody that's gonna make them do that.
right, I would hope that too. I just want to make sure that,
Right now,
No, not
Well,
all of them,
is
no.
is that what we're seeing all these complaints from
No.
parents about?
I think that's kind of back to what some of our
That's someone's
first.
interpretation of it.
And that's what
Well,
I'm
that's
that's
what
what I'm
he's trying
getting
to
at. How do we
avoid, yeah.
avoid the interpretation that says you have to know all these ways? Other than what we're saying is it's good to know a variety of ways, but you really need to know at least one way that works.
So they just need to know how to answer the problem and justify how they got to it. I mean,
Right.
so they I know this because it is 5 groups of 7. However they get to it, and they can do it, I'm good with it.
well, is that, what you said there with the justify, is that our fourth piece? Right now, this has no rigor to it. It's simple
It's just computation.
procedural computation. But if they have to justify an answer or the way they solve a problem, no matter what strategy they use.
But that's gonna get into word problems. Right now, if we're just talking about, we're just talking about performing operations.
Okay.
But when we get into actually solving word problems, they have to, how did you get that answer? Why does that answer make sense to solve that? You can't just tell me a number on a word problem. You gotta tell me why those 5 apples make sense. You know, then they've gotta start justifying. That's in a word problem.
So are we
To
gonna
me,
have a
that feels
third?
separate.
It is.
Either a-
This is just performing operations. This is just computation.
Okay,
So
so we
when,
need a third bullet
that would
or
be
a
solving word problems.
heading. Okay.
And I don't
The
know.
third cluster, you mean?
Well, or could we put perform operations and solve problems and just put it all in one
Perform operations
and solve
and solve
problems?
problems.
Hang on, let me see
I'm
where I'm
just
just finding it
interpreting what I'm
somewhere.
hearing.
So the third could be use, use computational strategies
Yeah.
to solve
You're
problems.
saying that in lieu of the multiple strategies?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was thinking, if we did a third point, I was saying, you know, instead of rehashing all those things,
And just stick on.
use the computational strategies to solve.
And that's where that mathematical reasoning is gonna come in, is right there.
Yeah.
I'll send half of them back that way. Thank
It's
Thank
what,
you.
oh, that's mine. It solve word problems, well, this one is a fraction. What is it not in the other one?
See, I
One-
looking
is
at
the
the
solve
the
word
others are front and back. We don't
Okay.
separate. I mean, we tried to put them
There it
together.
is.
Yes.
I guess, do,
This is just
No,
draft
so
always.
it's, solve word problems has to fit in
What's
here.
that?
Because even when we were talking about the fence, I was saying money problems. I mean, the whole time
Yes.
they're all money problems,
Okay,
they're
I'll take
building
one,
problems, or, so I was putting it in.
Okay, thank you.
I can't imagine that you would do a whole level without having.
No, I mean, I like them, I usually hit the computation before I hit word problems, but just so that they know that part of it, and then you do the explaining themselves, but if you, I mean, mathematical reasoning just comes in with it, so if we know that that's gonna be a part of it when you are solving word problems, I don't know how to word it, it's in the fractions, but I can't find it, in just the level.
Are you looking at the Glees?
Well, it's in the booklet too, it's also in the Glees. Solve word problems involving addition, subtraction, or fractions, referring to the same, see, that's fractions.
What about model problem situations? Is that what you're thinking of, maybe?
Well,
And draw conclusions using representations, and you can put whatever you want then.
yeah, I mean, it can
This
be
is
generically
fast
done with these proper operations with the mathematical reasoning, because that's what they need to be able to do.
Right.
So it goes along with all the mathematical practices with these operations. I mean, that's what it is.
Okay.
Can they do those mathematical practices? Which is those 7, 8 things. They gotta
So-
make sense of the problems, they gotta reason abstractly,
so
construct an argument.
essentially, we're looking for a standard that says we're gonna use the 3 things that we just talked about doing, you need to be able to do that in context.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out a way to say that, or the right place to put that.
Well, these mathematical practices have to fall in under every one of those domains. Like when I do algebraic reasoning, there's gonna be a word problem that they're gonna have to do, and they're gonna have to do a mathematical practice with that. So it's gonna have to fall in, that's why they're under every domain, because when they do a word problem, no matter what, we're doing algebraic reasoning, or we're doing numbers in base 10, or we're gonna do fractions, or we're gonna hit geometry, they have got to be able to put themselves in a word problem and justify it and argue it, why they are right, and know why they are right, and do that in a word problem. That's why that's in every one of them. So generically, somehow, we have to be able to say that in every one. I don't know where,
But would it be a separate standard, or would it be included in the
That's what I'm
standards
saying.
that are there? I don't know.
Could it go perform operations and solve problems?
But in the cluster heading?
The solve
I
problems.
guess my fear there is if how we arrange them so that the cluster headings don't get ignored. Because that
Right.
happens too.
yeah.
Or-
The explanation of that, even though they may have the wrong answer, but they can explain how they got that wrong answer, is that still okay?
I give them credit that they are,
If
you
the process
completely
is correct,
explained
you
it
mean?
to me, but you made a simple error in how you got there. So computationally, yes, they made an error, but they could tell me exactly how they got to that point, so they can use their mathematical reasoning and get there. That, I do not take that away from them.
And the point that I want to make clear is that they should also be able to use standard methods and explain why the standard methods work.
Yes.
Which is,
Yeah.
some places
Exactly.
have not allowed that, you know, so they're,
Yes,
um,
exactly.
so I want to make
think
sure that
that's
they
key.
can
They have to
justify their answer
understand how it
with
works.
whatever strategy they're using.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we just say with an appropriate strategy? Is
I think
that
that's,
So what are these right here?
mathematical practices?
And these are standards.
What?
Somebody told.
They're habits of, they're habits.
They are, they're practice standards. They're not content standards, they're practice standards.
They're embedded in the standards. That's what you're,
It's like that
What you're
mathematical,
talking about
It's
is
like this.
Yeah,
The
Somebody
reasoning,
told
that
me.
like
reasoning
California's
part.
reasoning.
And you're wondering how to include this within.
Well, just what we have right here doesn't explicitly say with any kind of reasoning or any context.
This is
or- There's
just
no
We just
rigor
shouldn't have to
necessarily
say that.
there.
Everyone
Operations.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why
just
it's
say it.
embedded, like it's just embedded in there. It's just like even the way we wrote our pacing guide for, even our reading standard. It's embedded that you
That's what
draw
I'm doing right now,
conclusions and
reading down,
infer,
so I can-
regardless, in any reading lesson you have, it's just there, it's not a particular lesson
I-
set aside.
So far,
That's
I've
what
been
these
saying,
are.
and I'll read off
These are
what I
just
have, see what people think.
Embedded in them, when I teach that, when I get to that word problem part, after I've done the computation, his parts are just embedded in there.
So here's what I wrote. I left what we had, the cluster heading, the 3 points that we had so far, and I added a fourth one. It says solve problems and justify answers with an appropriate strategy. Parentheses, e.g. using standard algorithms, concrete models or drawings.
Can we put the appropriate strategy up with solve, so that we're
Solve,
solving with a variety of strategies?
solve problems with or using an appropriate strategy.
I don't get why you're adding that, why you're adding that. Because if we have it here, why are you adding that?
Have it where?
Right here. Are we not gonna have this?
We don't
Sorry,
have it
yeah, I
yet.
haven't decided.
Because I mean, you could, what you're doing, you could basically add that with every single expectation that we have written.
Yeah, so
why
the
are you just
expectation is that they
sticking it in
know the
there?
procedural skills to solve problems, and they know how to apply it to.
Maybe we could put what you have and put it in color or something, and then come back later and decide whether or not it needs to stay, depending on if we create these overarching, and we call them overarching principles when we started the document. If we include a section on that, then maybe we wouldn't need.
Yeah, that sounds right. So what I have so far is, just trying to move some things around. Solve problems using an appropriate strategy and justify answers. So that's what I have.
We may not need this.
Maybe justify solutions.
Justify solutions.
I think your point is really well taken, the fact that some of these things, you need to put them in every one of them.
Right.
Well, just move that out
What we might call
down
the
there, but I'm not
dust
sure we're there to, yeah, it's exactly. Because that's logical for every one of them, but,
Right.
and it may be once you kind of put them together and you put all these words that James is putting in here, there'll be those things that go, no, wait a minute, that's in 4 out of the 5 or whatever. That's probably something that ought to be an overarching
Yeah,
thing that needs to be taken out of the standard itself. And,
just know that you teach
Put
it
in-
when you teach the
Exactly.
standard, that it's just there, it's embedded in it,
but
yes.
until we get to that point and we can look at it all. at
Because
one
this
time.
says here, use appropriate tools strategically, or reason abstractly and quantitatively, it just says that we're really doing that anyway, that's one of the things we're
Well,
going to do, it's a mathematical practice, you're going to do that.
So that's why it would be helpful if we really knew what's a standard, what's a grade level expectation, what's a cluster, what's a domain, because we're kind of mixing all of these together and calling them different things at different times.
Well, let's
you know.
just for our purposes define it then. So these are
Domain.
domains. Our next thing that we're calling down, we're calling our clusters,
Cluster heading.
and then what we're working on now, we're calling standards.
But they're really not.
No.
They are
Well,
not.
I think that this is the expectation
Right.
of what, I think it's what schools expect, is it not?
No, I don't think we can go with that, just because it's what schools expect, it's not a standard. I think we should do standards the right way. And don't call grade level expectations standards, because these little grade level expectations are not standards.
So then the standards would be what? These?
The standards would be these big items, these are standards, okay? And then we write specific grade level expectations to go under the standards. And
Which are suggestions, not requirements.
exactly,
Well,
But is
and which really do develop your curriculum.
where the tests
That's
are
why
coming
they call those curriculum, but I think if we could do that, we could clear up a whole lot of confusion across the whole state of Missouri. You know, people are like, well, what, because we keep talking about an order, well, I don't really know if that's a domain, or was that, what'd you say you call that, a cluster, or what is that? We need to get it straight, and we need to do it right.
I think I see where she's coming from, because I think if you call something a standard,
It's the
that
big
says this
item.
is mandatory. But if you call it a expectation or a framework or a guideline, then it's, this is the general idea, get to it how you need to get to it.
And you don't wanna put a little blurb down at the bottom of the expectations over here that we're writing and say there's gonna be problem solving there. Cause I mean, it's, a new teacher's gonna look at that and, I mean, they might be working through this and then say, oh, I've gotta get down there to that one that said problem solving, so, you know, that's gotta be there all the time, and it's just like you said, you know, all of these are used everywhere. I don't know how to
so
make that clear.
does that change what we're doing, or does it just change what we need to start calling it? I mean, because,
I think you're right. I
It's
think-
just
I
the
think
wording,
a
it's
word.
the
I think
semantics
it's
of
a
it.
word.
But her point is, I think we should highlight this last one we did, and then
right,
come back to that idea.
I do, I
That's
agree.
How
right.
we're gonna handle those.
Well, I even made a note of
No,
the
no.
overarching principle.
That's the whole point of mathematics.
I mean, so I'm-
Solving problems.
I'm looking at, I pulled up Massachusetts, and I know, like, Sandy Stotsky was heavily involved in this, and she taught, when I was in Arkansas, taught a course on standards, and so, I'm just trying to look at what she says, you know, which things she calls are the specific standards. And,
I'm sure that's agreed.
and, I mean, if you look at, but if you, yeah, so if you look at Massachusetts, like it says grades pre-K through K learning standards. And then it says students engage in problem solving, communicating, reasoning, connecting, representing as they count by ones to at least 20, match quantities up to at least 10. So I mean, it's the same,
That's the framework down that you read.
well, it's, I mean, so it says, I mean, there's no clear delineation between,
So do they have that little heading above every, do they have that right under each domain? Students, like, I'm looking at that under number sense, do they say that?
yeah, so they have number sense, which is the sort of domain, and then it says grades 1, 2 learning standards. Students engage in problem solving, communicating, reasoning, connecting, and representing
And
as
it's the
they.
grade span, they have two
Okay,
grades
yeah,
on
So-
it.
So I think what you're saying is right, that the overarching principles are the standards. But what we're working on now is what we mean by that. The grade level expectations are how you display that.
They title them learning standards.
They do.
So perform operations with
Learning
multiple numbers is standard. Now we're defining that standard and what, how they get to it.
Right.
Patterns, relations,
Yeah,
algebra,
I can look at that.
strand.
Which are all based out of the
Because-
NCAA.
So you have the strand, what we're,
We have our
the
domains.
domains, then the standard, which the standard is what we were calling our cluster grouping, so that's the standard, what we want students to do, and then what we're getting underneath then is the
Expectation.
expectation for how you do that standard.
All right.
And California kind of did it that way, as far as students make decisions about, well, that's not a good example. So they have students use variables and simple expressions and so forth, and then they break it down farther.
Yeah, right. Do they do that
So we
every
make
time?
sure we have the
Yeah.
same common.
Go ahead, look at it.
What are we calling these expectations or grade level expectations?
Right now, like we said, we'll probably have to talk to 612 because however we structure it, because that's what we're doing right now. This is the structure.
Mhm.
However we structure it, it's gonna have to be a K-12 structure.
Actually, it'd be nice if all the subject areas did the same terminology.
Yeah.
You're right.
But that's basically what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Whether ours
Yeah.
call it that, there may be a different term to call it.
Standards are now, these are the expectations.
I don't know.
So-
We have to show that they do that.
Oh, ELA is.
Sorry.
They're not there here as well.
Or the 6 through 12.
Oh, it's 6 through 12.
Oh,
They're
Well,
in
those are-
the
column,
trim
just
and
the
clarity
whole
yesterday.
now is standards, and the other ones are the grade level expectations.
Right, so the standard would be, at 5th grade, students need to understand the place value system. Here's what we mean by that. They need to perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals. Here's what we mean by that. Sort of, so our GLEs are sort of the clarification of the standard.
And it's that kind of a guideline type.
Yes.
I mean, you're free to use something else if you want to, but as long as they get this basic information here.
Right.
But however they get to it.
Yeah, because I think eventually, whatever is accepted, whatever we, that's going to be the document from which they develop assessments.
Right.
So the more information we can give teachers, I think the better they're going to like it.
That's really what we.
Yeah, I mean, we need them to know. That's how they help their kids be successful.
I'm wondering though, if that's the document that that the test is gonna be developed from, if we include too much in there, does that open up things?
I think this is the balancing, we kept talking about a balancing act yesterday, between going too much, going too
Yeah.
little.
Do we
too
give them too
specific?
much guidelines and then allow that to be used, whereas somebody may not use that section down there, they may use something different?
I guess
Should,
I,
you going with your theory, should we be less restrictive, more?
I think, kind of to Myra's point, if say we offered no clarification and we just left perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals, then that's the Wild West. It's too open.
yeah.
every single question you could possibly pull out of any test bank around anywhere.
Right.
Feels like
That's
when
when
you
you
see
see
the kid break down and cry.
Yeah, it feels like
And then-
We're protecting the kids by doing a little bit.
And then going too far to the other way is saying, you need to solve this problem and this problem and this problem and do it this way and this way. And so it's
We're
this
not
balancing act between the two.
And I think that's what we've got now with a lot of the horror stories that you're hearing. I think you're having districts or even buildings or teachers looking at that thinking, literally, this is the only way that I can teach this.
But that's,
I think
that
that's-
happens with whatever we give, that happened with the GLEs, that happened with, I mean, it doesn't, it's going to happen, because it's
Sure.
always an interpretation, but.
So what it seems like we have a consensus around trying to eliminate misinterpretations.
Yes.
And
That's
trying
what
to-
we'd like to.
Trying to be very clear so that people know what the expectations are.
And yet general enough to allow them movement within that expectation to do what they feel is best for their kids.
Right.
Teach it in the
And
best
it-
possible way.
Again, the balance.
That's right.
Can I ask one more question about these right here, so this gray box? Do
Yeah.
these
Yeah, I think that goes with
replace
the
these?
No.
It was nice when you were in the other building and we were right next door.
Teach.
Yeah, instead of outsourcing
Yeah.
it to somebody.
Well,
Yeah.
So much.
just run next door and say, hey, we got this question.
That we want kids to be able to do, but again, it really defines it
Right.
specifically for mathematics.
So
I don't think they did anything like that in like ELA or.
we're not changing that document.
We can't change that. I think he said that this
Yeah,
morning,
they
that's a
don't set the same
legislative
law.
something or, I
That
don't
would be
know.
another
Like
step.
coding
We
isn't
can't
the same.
change, we would.
Well, if that's called the show me standards, then and we're tasked with doing this work, but it seems that we're not writing standards, we're writing expectations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
and that was a point.
that's what
and I
he
think
didn't
I made that point
understand
this
what he was
morning, you know,
saying this morning.
If these are, if what we're doing, the learning standards is just the guideline or suggestions,
You can call them that,
yeah, call them that.
because we can't
You know,
change
because
it.
that way, that does tell the districts, you can use them if you want to, But if you say, this is the
Can't.
standards,
This is what they're following anyway,
that's got a little bit more
can't
oomph
change
to it.
those. So you didn't.
But it just seems like it's a lot of work for the teachers to have to follow this and include this to justify that I'm doing all this work from Missouri Showing Standards, then, oh, I'm doing all of these, and I'm doing all of it. How do teachers do that in their
But
lesson
this is,
plans?
the blue placemat is so generic, we can cross-reference, when we complete this document, it will be 30 minutes cross-referencing what we have here with that.
Cause
They'll
there's such
all
a
fit under
broad
the 5,
statement.
all the domains will connect to one of those goals,
Sorry,
of those
but why
content
does it
goals.
really matter?
Because that has been in place from,
Just because it's been there forever, so we gotta just do
And
it.
it's legislative.
Hey, read state statutes, what an idiot, most of them.
it's what's
Talking about the blue places, this is something that I found interesting this week. The, is it the RPCD, is that correct?
RPDC.
RPDC.
Regional professional.
Alright. The Southeast region has told their teachers, this is no longer in effect.
Oh, no,
Now this is what we're using.
no.
So we've got many issues going on within the state, and within our training, you know, that says, you know, I mean, and this is the R.
It's,
supposed to
he's
be-
pulling up the math practices,
Yeah.
which is the gray box,
With,
because those process
Dr.
standards
McCollum's
connect with those
division.
process
Yeah,
standards.
and they're saying, you don't need to worry about this anymore, they've done away with this takes that place.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I work at an RPDC and I carry the blue placemat with me when I go to schools and I ask them, do you still have this? As far as I'm concerned, this is our Bible in education. This is our foundation. Everything we do has to fit under those. Don't throw it away.
Well, that's good to know, because like I said, I know down in our area, they're telling the teachers, get rid of this.
Well,
No.
This is
I mean,
it.
if, so if we,
This is the Bible.
And Marilyn, these are so broad that really everything does that we do, it does
Exactly.
fit
But-
under there.
But I still, I don't want
But
us to
then
get
we get
lose
into the
sight.
standards and we define more specifically what it means
So-
for the grade level.
Right, were you teaching when we didn't used to have that stuff?
Yeah, I would.
And we had
Yeah.
that craziness? Oh,
And we're like, what, how do we get the, you know, cause this
Exactly.
is all we were looking at and not really,
That's
we didn't
right.
have the standards to teach in
I
first
remember
grade.
seeing
Started
those
out
grade
with
spans, which didn't help either, you know.
This is
Like,
Yeah, this was-
If you were a kindergarten teacher and reading these mathematics standards,
We need
you
to
can
get rid
kill
of
them.
this.
Very helpful.
They're not very helpful, as a kindergarten, first grade teacher.
But the problem, that blue placemat is just what they need to know by the end of 12th grade.
Yeah,
So,
this is
I mean,
our
so-
end
That's what
result.
that's
If we
the
think
end,
about-
that's the end game.
if we think about what we're doing, and I apologize that I wrote in red and you can't see it, the show me standards are the very broad top overview.
What you need to know when you graduate high
That's the
school.
end game.
Then,
Yeah.
then we have the second sheet you held up, which is gonna be what we kind of say are overarching principles. The sort of last thing we talked about, that we wrote down. And then under that are domains. Right, so we're really thinking of a hierarchy of generality from very general to becoming more and more specific.
But we're using the standard terms on several levels of that hierarchy,
Right,
it seems to me.
so you have,
And
I
that's
think
really,
you're right.
that's
You have-
really confusing. We got show me standards, well, what does that mean? That's standards. Then we go down and some cases, some people call domain stand, but
right,
Well, then
it's just a terminology, the
Yes.
nomenclature is confusing.
so we'll have to work on that across the
And I
groups.
really think
But-
coming from a parent or taxpayer's perspective, we really need to keep in mind, we're not just really just writing these for teachers, we're writing them for the people in our district too. So if a parent comes in, they can look at these and go, oh, that's what little Johnny or Susie is supposed to do.
Do you feel like we're doing a good job of that, Janet? With what we've
Some
written
of it, I
so
think
far?
we're gonna have to go back and tweak a little bit. If I handed it to some of my parents, would be like, okay, I really do.
In
I mean-
general, are we making it kind of okay?
Well, I think we're
But
trying
I
to
think
run the right
it's
track.
okay, because I think that parents and teachers are supposed to partner together. I mean,
Yes.
that's the whole purpose.
I think it's a significant
Things
improvement.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100%, I think that, and that's one thing that I didn't like about the Common Core, because you couldn't understand a lot of the stuff that was in it. Teachers may not have been able to
We
understand really
didn't,
what
I
it
will
said.
confess to you, we
I
didn't.
know
There's a
parents did,
few-
I know
there's a-
parents did.
Yeah.
I got some of it. There was some that I had to question, but it was some of it because it was put in front of us without any explanation.
But then there's a
So then
balance
we were just
between
expected to do it.
education needs that you guys really need and what me as a parent need to make sure that I understand what my kid's going through. So
If we want
it's a
that,
balance between that
yeah, I'm
somehow.
sorry, if we want that support at home, we're gonna have to make it in a way that it's user friendly for them too.
But it was one of the comments I made yesterday was there are some mathematical terms, quotient. Some people don't know what a quotient, you know, I mean, so there's some
can't
things that we
change
can't change.
Right.
That there's some mathematical understanding that you have to have, right.
But it's easily
then-
explainable to
Right,
somebody too.
exactly.
Like we talked with examples, sometimes a picture paints
Right.
is worth 1,000 words, you
exactly.
know, and putting those examples under there is very
And
helpful.
I think that's something that when we get
We'll
done
later
with
do
this,
that.
We do
needs
it.
to be one of the overarching, I mean, a principle, but I think having examples to show what we're talking about would be incredibly helpful, like whichever one's got it, maybe it's California, Massachusetts, I don't remember which one had
I
it.
think it's,
To me, that helps. Now I get it. And I understand, and that does take care of some of the education ease, if I see an example. Oh, okay, that makes sense to me as
right.
an example, even though I may not understand completely what the mathematical jargon is.
Right.
And if you weren't here earlier, you'll notice on the last thing, you know,
Yeah.
that has an input-output table. I just snagged that off Google and
Yeah.
stuck it in as a reminder that we talked about providing an example of that. So it's not what we're using or anything, I just didn't wanna forget, and so I stuck it in yesterday when I shared, I just left it.
Yeah, I
this morning.
appreciate that, because that's exactly what I was talking about, putting stuff like that
So, and we'll decide at some point where we want it.
I think one of the things that I'm still confused on, and we didn't even get an answer to it this morning, in, you know, listening to Representative Barr, is despite the progress that we've made on this, is this even what we're supposed to be doing? Because the law says that the state board will develop the written curriculum frameworks, which is what they said are the Missouri Learning Standards, or the frameworks.
Well,
And I'm just, I would love for us to get clarification on that.
well, I
And
mean,
we tried this morning, like I said, we tried this morning and it was just kinda
to the,
ping pong around,
to the
so.
point that he made about we determine the work group, what we do in the work groups. I think that we have determined that this is the right path. I mean, that, it seems like we're doing what, I mean, this is what I would expect us to be doing.
Me too. I'm just hoping that at the end point, at the end of all this, that the state board looks at that and goes, it's not what you were supposed to be doing.
What, would it be okay if we get a quick,
I'm hoping that we're,
quick outside
We got a
opinion?
30-day benchmark to say.
I guess so, when we
When we turn the
present our
report
first.
in, and the state board or
Yeah.
whoever looks at it and goes, that is not anything that,
Is it?
At least
I
we
can't
know.
imagine that
Oh,
he would
I'm
have
not-
been,
I'm not
you know,
sure.
like,
but I'm just,
yeah.
I don't have.
but we don't have to
Is
wait
it
until October
all this,
15th
your curriculum
to find out,
framework,
hey, we
your
wasted a year.
philosophy,
We'll know in
what's
30
supposed
days
to work out,
or
and
6
then
months, well,
later,
depending, at
when you
least.
get down the
Like I said,
nitty-gritty, you
that's-
start.
That would be very much helpful.
That's what I understand curriculum frameworks to be, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's.
Okay, so where are we? Are we done with number, sense, and operations in base 10? We have the two standards according to our chart. Understand the place value system and perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals. We have four, right now, we have four glees under each of those, with the last one, solve problems using an appropriate strategy and justify solutions, highlighted for later revisiting.
The only thing that we kind of skipped over yesterday, I think Leslie talked about this, was using powers of 10 with place value. Is that an important thing to include?
And that's
So you're saying-
the places, that, I had a note of that too, somehow we skipped over that.
Are you saying using base 10, or are you saying something?
Powers of
Powers
ten.
of
Powers of 10.
So if they're doing expanded notation, they can write 100 as 10 to the second power.
And that
Can we
would
do
go
that
up
this way?
underneath, understand place value system, because it's
Oh, it
1,000 is 10 to the third power, or 100 is 10 to the second.
it needed a lot of updates. It's just now ready for her to log on to.
Was that somewhere else in a different state, or in the Common Core that we didn't bring it in?
I don't know, my daughter did it in fifth grade a couple years ago without whatever we had in fifth grade then. I just know they started in fifth grade, I don't know how long you've been teaching fifth grade.
Years ago I did teach it,
And I taught it in Colorado in fifth grade, that was quite a few years ago too, I mean, that's going back
And
like
it's
12 years.
positive integer exponents for this
Yes,
sixth
positive.
grade. It's fifth and sixth grade in
Yeah.
Massachusetts, but
Mhm.
it's really just powers of 10. I mean, it's using your place value system. You know how we talked about yesterday, that to the right is 10 times, to the left is a 10. It's using those powers.
Well, is that, so that standard that we put in yesterday, understand that a multi-digit number, a digit in one place, represents 10 times as much as it represents in that standard, does that cover it, or does that sound like we need something additional?
So you're asking, should we?
Yeah, should be, I know our science teachers would probably say, yes.
Yeah.
But, are they ready for it, I guess is what we're asking ourselves.
I'm not finding, I'm doing a quick skim through California, and I'm not seeing anything about powers. But I could be missing it, because I'm doing a quick skim through.
Well, if we expected when you say expanded notation, that it could include powers. So if we're going to expect that, then we probably need to somehow put
And
in
here it is. I found it in California.
what does it say?
Understand and compute positive integer powers of non-negative integers. Compute examples as repeated multiplication.
Yeah, 10 times 10.
Where was that?
California, it's
Say
under
it
number
again.
sense, it's 1.3.
Say it one more time.
Understand and compute positive integer powers of non-negative integers. Compute examples as repeated multiplication.
I think
And then-
that's more sixth grade. I think in fifth grade, we wanna stick with powers of 10, not
And-
positive, like all the different
Let me
numbers.
back
And they
up
have,
and see.
and they have which is bigger, 3 to the 5th power or 5 to the 3rd power?
And see, I mean, they could think of 3 times 3 times 3 times, but that's really more of the sixth grade when you get into multiples and factors.
It's the very first one on Massachusetts.
They introduce
But
it
it's
in
fifth
fifth grade,
six.
3 to 5th, and they're knowing that they're identifying it as, that is not 3 times 5.
But
But that is 3 times
Is
3
that a
times
in
3.
Massachusetts, it's powers of 10. So not 3 to the 5th power, but 10 to the 3rd power, or 10 to the 4th power. It's
And
the
it's
10
very
is being the base.
I see what you're saying.
We
So
want,
I guess the question is that something that you wanna have be testable?
Right,
So,
Or do you just wanna
introduce it.
have it introduced so that they're ready for that next year, that next level?
and I think we,
Well, that's where we need to
Sixth
know
grade.
what they're doing for sixth grade.
and I think,
Yeah,
didn't we
like I said,
exclude
like
exponents
you-
right
and
now,
those
I
else?
always in here, it's gonna
Say
be.
We
it's
excluded
testable.
it in,
But
we
that's
excluded it in
fine.
order of operation, Jess, I would not wanna put anything other than the place value, the powers of 10. I also think that requiring past powers of 10 doesn't make sense, but they could understand the powers of 10 because of place value, which would make a nice foundation for them doing general exponents the next year.
Mhm.
Do you think it needs to be in there?
The powers of 10, yes, because we're not gonna put it in order of operations for fifth
right,
grade.
we're not gonna combine it with operating other
No.
things. It's just understanding what we mean by 10 to the 3rd power. And in finding its value, 5th graders can figure out 10 times 10 times 10 because it's the place value piece. It connects back to that place value piece.
I have a whole anchor chart on
We can use that as our example on the example.
it. Well, it came off Pinterest, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, I know, I can plagiarize in my own classroom, but I might not wanna put it down in document.
do another highlight.
Well, if we could put it in on the 3rd standard where we say we have expanded form, we could put in parentheses including exponents, including use of exponents and highlight it, I don't know if we wanna do that or not.
Or we could just put a note for today,
We could
and
just
then
not put
talk
it.
to 6th grade and come to
The
a
only thing I can see there
conclusion.
is if you just left it as including exponents, there again, you're opening it
Yeah,
up
you're
to.
right, just could be more,
It
yeah.
could be
a wide
3 to the
range.
5th power,
You're right.
29 to the 3rd power.
Sixth grade right now.
Okay, so the question then, I guess, is what would you want them to do or know with that, thinking about the power of 10? So what is the expectation of what you,
That 10 is the base number, it is repeated multiplication, it is 10 to the 3rd, it's 10 times 10 times 10.
And what that's value is.
And what its value is.
And then it connects to our place value system.
so,
Which way is the decimal going to move?
so would it be, so if we want them to find the value of
10 to the 3rd, 10 to the 8th, 10 to the.
and understand its relationship to the place value system?
That's what they're doing with that.
So we would want, do you like
And
that?
we want both parts, yes.
So, let me see if I can remember what I said. See if you can remember what I said. So I'm putting it under the 3rd one, so we had a new one going
Put
in.
it under the second one, I think,
Okay.
maybe.
Under the what, where the 10 times and 110?
Okay, so find the value of what?
Exponents with a base of 10. Does that sound right?
Base of 10,
We can fix it.
and understand how it relates to the,
The value of powers.
Towers of ten.
alright, so, I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
So they've got it said better than I said it, so erase.
So, okay, so what did you say?
You just find the value of powers of 10.
Hours of 10.
And relate it to the place value system, right?
And relate it or understand how it relates?
Understand how it
And
Understand
how this relates.
the relationship.
understand the relationship to the place value system.
What do you think, Janet, fifth grade
Well, I
teacher?
was wondering, do you think that they would throw in maybe using it in, showing it in expanded form?
Which is the next one, read, write, compare
Okay.
decimals to thousands, place value in word,
But are you
standard and expanded form. So if they could learn, I mean, we're kind of putting them in sequential order, if they understand powers of 10, then when we write it in expanded form, they might use the power of 10, or if they write, 10 times 10, then without exponents, it would be equivalent,
Yeah.
so.
How many zeros do we have?
Generally,
So-
my experience with fifth grade is they get so excited about the exponents because it's new and different and cool.
So I added a little bit in, and you can tell me if you like this or not, but so here's what I have. I have find the value of powers of 10, parentheses, just to explain what powers of 10 is to anyone who doesn't know, exponents with the base of 10, and understand the relationship to the place value system.
What's in your parentheses again?
Exponents with a
Exponents.
base of 10.
I put a base of 19, that'd be fun.
New math.
You can come teach my class. I'll let you handle that
19,
one.
woo!
I'll sit back and observe and watch my little kids go, what is she doing?
Do we need to have
And they wouldn't be the
positive
first
anywhere?
ones to
And
say
it wouldn't be the low kids that would question you, the upper kids would be.
Well, we haven't included negative
I think
anywhere.
it's an understanding that we're in positive or
Yeah.
rational numbers.
I would hope that that's what everybody understands when they're 10 years old. Okay, that's where we're at. Okay, if you've got some over aggressive fifth grade teacher, well, God bless them. Like,
Well, I'm not worried about the teacher as much as the testing
Well, that's
bodies and
true.
that information.
That's true, and we're talking about decimal place values. So that will be,
I mean, the interpretation is that you could link it. I mean, the way it's stated right now, but we're fine, I'm fine.
Okay, so now we have we have
Need to write it over too.
two standards and 4 glees under each of them.
I have 5 under understand the place value.
Oh yeah, you're right. Mine broke across the page. I
Okay,
didn't see
okay.
it. You're right.
That's all right.
All right, instead of find the value, can we put evaluate powers of 10 and understand the relationship that this sounds better? Evaluate powers of 10, exponents with the base of 10, and understand the relationship to the place value system. What?
Hit
I said
save,
I'm hitting save.
because we can always come back to it.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
can
I
always
can
come
always
back to
change
it.
it.
When we see it all lined out, all completed, then we can, or
well, numbers and operations of base 10, that's your, that's your foundation, because those are your computation skills. You've gotta have a few more things in there, because if they don't get place value, they're not getting numbers, so you've
Right.
got to lay that one out, so. That's, and it's a
That's
tricky
huge
one.
Starting right.
Place value, you start at the beginning of every year, and it kills them every time, and it's more frustrating. I never thought it was difficult to learn myself, but for some reason, I don't know, kids.
I really have trouble with decimals. It seems
Yeah,
like.
well, just even, I don't know, place value is hard for whatever reason.
So it sounds like we're finished with number sets and operations in base 10.
So where
It's-
are we going
It's
next?
now 11:10, and are we lunch at noon, or? Everyone just
Quick bathroom break.
quick, do we take a quick break?
Recommendation is to go a little bit before 12. I know we had to walk last time, but they were recommending to be there a little bit before 12.
Are we just going
Downstairs.
downstairs, or are we going?
No, we're downstairs. When we were in the other building, the governor's building, you know, we broke at 11:45 so that you could walk over, so it's up to you, just saying that.
But they recommend us be down there before 12 is
Beat
what
the
you
rush,
said?
beat the rush.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of the offices go at
11.
noon.
11:30? Or do we
Just
want to
have
share?
that big breakfast, James.
Yeah, I did have a big breakfast, so it's up to you guys.
Are you saying you're already
The only
hungry?
thing I want is more cappuccino.
I think I need a little more coffee.
We had biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I did too.
I think
That's
the
Sam
6 through
Cohen.
12 group
Oh.
will welcome you guys over there. They said they have plenty of room. So like if in the afternoon you guys wanna meet, feel like
Check it
you
all
can
the way
meet with
over
that 6 through
Yeah,
12.
next time
They're all the
they're,
way at Truman, but they do have more space,
I
so.
think next time we're here, they're here also, and they happen to be downstairs on the first floor.
Of this building, you think?
What,
And we're
I
up
think,
here.
I
I think
like
we
the
need to make
idea
a
of-
request that we meet in the same
Isn't
building.
that right?
Yes, and so Jerry said that, so I put that on the request
We need
sheet,
a request
that
in the same
elementary and secondary meet in the same building.
So is
they
that
can
the 20th?
collaborate.
I'm not opposed to meeting with them to discuss this stuff here, but I would like to, when we have a formal meeting with them, to have our 5th grade stuff to show them. As you were saying, hopefully we can have something
And
finished
it would
to,
be in the Dropbox. I did pull up the minutes while we were, like their minutes or notes, just to see if there was any notation about exponents. And I haven't made it all the way through, but I haven't seen anything yet. I did see that they put circle graphs back in for 6th and 7th grade. Generally thoughts.
so do we want to go ahead and start on data and statistics and try to get a little bit finished there?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
Break at 11:45. Sounds good.
So we finished 3 so far, relationships and outbreak thinking, number sense, and geometry and measurement.
No, mine, yeah,
Do you see that you, in the
we
Dropbox,
finished
you
relationships
have
and
their
outbreak thinking,
notes,
number
so
sense
you
and
can go
operations
through
and base
their
10, and
notes too.
that's,
I thought we
That's
did
all, right?
geometry. Oh, no, we didn't go past that. Nope, you're right. Nope, never
So,
mind. You're right.
data and statistics, am I
We didn't have
missing
anything
something
for that.
under it? I thought we had some,
We only had one.
Cause we moved all the measurement out.
We moved all the measurement out.
I don't have
We're gonna do
anything under it.
fractions now
Oh,
because we
display
just
and
did number
analyze and
operation.
interpret data probably is
So-
what's supposed to be.
What if we
So
went
that's
into
supposed to be-
number and sense operation?
With
Yeah, actually, that's
fractions,
our number
because
one.
we just did decimal and whole numbers, so it seems
That way.
logical that we would
Would you guys
knock
be
out
okay
the
with that?
fraction piece before we go into data and statistics.
I'm sorry, I missed it, well, all of what
If
you're
we
saying.
could go into number and operation with fractions before data and statistics or geometry and measurement. Because with number and operation and base 10, what are you talking about decimals?
There's not.
Okay.
No, I got it, I got it.
So,
Yeah.
So the
so
fraction piece would
fractions?
be-
Got it.
next,
Is that all right? with
Number and
everyone?
operations and fractions, and it looks like maybe it just didn't get,
Yeah.
folded there.
Okay.
So down at the bottom, so it's there.
oh yeah, I didn't make it great big.
Myra, you're fired.
Oh.
Okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
And I don't know why I wrote be careful here, but something that somebody
Because
said
of
when we were doing
percents, we
this.
wanna be careful what we say.
Okay,
Maybe, that's what it was.
my note, we got all my notes too. Okay. So we're starting with, is our number one, or do we wanna move it to number 2? Understand, doesn't matter to me, I think number 1 is.
Understood.
Do the perform operations and solve product and fraction.
Yeah, I think that's gonna come last, but, okay. I'm ready.
So understanding the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents.
Called the adjectives, but I do think the word basic would be appropriate for this one, understand the basic relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents. We're just doing we did say we were gonna limit it to, factors of 100, correct?
Wrong thought, hey. What's basic?
I know, I hate
I mean, it's
simple,
like fluent,
complex, I
it's
don't
like all that,
but-
and it may
So we
take
need to
10 words
define
to,
it.
it may take 10 words to define basic, and I'd rather use basic, but I'm not sure, I don't know, I don't understand what basic. What's basic for me is not basic for Janet, maybe, she's, you know, be way past it, but
What's basic
The-
for
the-
fifth grade?
the less
That's why we're
the-
gonna have
the
to
less
give an example of what
confu-
basic looks
ambiguity
like.
that's in there, the better we are,
Well,
but
so we talked
Yeah.
about limiting the denominator to
Yeah,
factors
yeah,
of 100, so that would be what I would.
that's what you would define
Instead
as
of
basic.
using that term, really specify what kind of denominators will be used
Do-
with these.
Do we wanna start with something about, I think, James, you're the one that said it yesterday, that really fractions, decimals, and percents are just different names for the same idea. Do we wanna say something like that, that they, maybe it's not a tested item, and we used to be able to put stars by things that we thought would be good to be taught, but we aren't gonna try to test it, that they really get that there's not a difference between the three of them, they're just different.
I guess,
Recognize equivalency.
my just thought is, I think, you know, what you call basic, or you get really wordy. I don't think that's relevant, not right now, because we need to come back to it as long as we get what are we trying to say? Because we can wordsmith it. I mean, what we do today is not going to concrete by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's important, what's that basic concept that you're talking about, and then we can add, if basic's not the right word, then just come up with explanation of what basic means, but, it's a lot easier to put more in and take it out, I mean, you know, and reduce it.
So you were saying understand the equivalency between them, and then one of the things I was talking about yesterday and what we discussed was, we thought that students should be able to convert a fraction into a decimal and a decimal into a percent.
I'm just saying a step above that, where they actually realize, yes, we can do these conversions, but it's not just magic that we're just writing a different name for the same idea. It feels, sounds really silly, but that really true understanding before we start asking them to do these conversions.
No, I understand, I understand, I have, what you're saying, the question is, how do we write that?
I don't know.
So,
You got
just
the magic
starting
finger.
somewhere, well, I almost started to write the exact same thing we had to understand the relationship between,
How about equivalencies?
Demonstrate understanding.
Could we say something like, understand that parts of a whole can be expressed with fractions, decimals, or percents? And then talk about the equivalencies?
And that might be a substandard under that?
or the clarification, so understand that parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents.
As or with? I'm just asking because she said
What
with
about
and you said as.
Oh,
the heading that
I see.
says use equivalent fractions as a strategy to add and subtract fractions? I don't know how you could change
That's
that.
a different, yeah, I think that's
I
another
agree.
standard,
We
because
already
that's
do
with
that
adding.
over in adding.
No, I think
No,
it
it's
needs,
fractions, it needs to be one of these, but it's not the same as understanding the parts of a whole. I was thinking of sets though, the set could be a whole.
So,
You know how, a lot of times in younger grades, that's when they first start to introduce the idea, they're doing more set models than,
what if we said, that kind of tying what you're saying and what I'm saying together, instead of putting them in separate standards, understand that parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents by converting, I don't know if converting is the right phrase, you know, sort of in that fractions to decimals and percents.
because I think the conversion piece is more of showing equivalency, that it represents the same amount no matter how you show it. But I do think that when they look at something, I don't always have to say this is a fraction. If I put it in a decimal form, it's the same amount as the fraction. If I put it in a percent form, it's the same amount as the decimal in the fraction.
Because it's understanding those equivalencies under
Mhm.
understanding.
It's
I mean,
equivalency,
yeah.
yeah, I think what you're, like the conversion piece is more of the equivalency piece.
So would a test item be under this, excuse me, you know, students are shown 1/2, 0.5, and 50%, and 37%, or whatever they're asked to identify which ones mean the same thing.
Or 2 out of the 5 are shaded in, and then they're given the fraction 2/5 or the decimal amount, or and which ones represent this, or which one doesn't represent, and there's one that's not
Right.
the equivalent.
which is different than them just making one conversion.
It's really recognizing that I could state that relationship in more than one way.
So maybe we don't need to clarify this more. Understand parts of a whole can be expressed, and I don't know if you like as or with. Understand that
I was just
parts of a
clarifying.
whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents.
Fifth grade teachers,
sorry, I was.
I just said, understand parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents. And the second one would be that conversion or equivalency piece. Marilyn, what did you think on that one?
I just was like recognize, but that's low level, it's recognizing equivalencies, I don't know how we wanna word it.
How about right equivalent, right equivalent?
Given
I
a
got that twice.
How about given a value less than
I
one,
did.
be able to write equivalency, its equivalency either as a fraction or decimal or percent.
So say it one more time.
Given a value of less than one, be able to write its equivalency as either a fraction, a decimal, or percent. Will that work?
Do we wanna limit it to just those ones that are easier to work with?
So you don't have 0.66 repeating, or,
Say it one more
I
time.
mean,
Given a value of less than one,
Right,
be able to write its equivalency as either a fraction, decimal, or percent.
I don't know,
Or express its equivalency, however you express it.
I understand why we don't like the repeating, but at the same time, 2/3 is one that's students need to have some understanding of, I think.
but that is really sixth grade.
2/3 is,
When we get into more in sixth grade, because then if I have the other rational piece, I can convert it back to 2/3. Like I can make those.
And if you don't limit it, so 2/3 isn't that tough to deal with, but there's a lot of
1/9.
repeating decimals that are very difficult to deal
I
with.
agree.
And there's a relationship between thirds, sixths, and ninths, and so they'll get the sixth, and then they'll get their thirds and ninths in there. So it's in a bigger picture.
well, another piece to consider is, does this prevent going from percents to fractions?
See, the way it's worded, it doesn't.
Right. And we said that in some cases, we might want them to do that. In 75%, 50%, 25, 90. We said on some of those basic ones, we would be fine.
That's why I'm gonna go back to suggesting that we, and I don't know how to word it, but say something about limited to denominators that are factors of 100, because then they can deal with some percents. It's not hard to take 75% and get a fraction if you,
I
And
see.
really, that's what for mental math, we would want them to start with that. Because when they see 25, we don't want them to convert it necessarily to a fraction, to the decimal, and then, because they could figure out,
Right.
okay, it goes in there 4 times, so it's gonna be.
How many quarters are there in a dollar?
Mhm.
There are 4. How much is a quarter worth? 25.
Doing some of that mental encouraging that at least.
Mhm. So what we have so far that we need to tinker with is given a value of less than 1, be able to write its equivalency as either a fraction, decimal, or a percent.
We changed right to
Oh.
express.
Express.
And I think just to stay consistent with our other ones, we'd start with express the equivalency, given the value less than express.
could we just put in parentheses, then fractions limited to values that would,
I think that it should be like I worry about the asterisk because we don't look at the footnotes, obviously, some schools didn't do that, but maybe in parentheses, we could put in the standard heading, where it says understand the relationship between fractions, decimals, percent, in parentheses, but limited to denominators of fractions with a factor of 100.
That's where I think it should go to.
You think so?
How did
Yes.
you,
Say that again.
how did you
Limited
say
to
it? Limited
denominators.
to denominators that
the denominators that
Are
are
factors of 100.
What do you think?
Yes.
Factors of 100?
Yeah, so,
Is that what we want?
yes,
so you
That would
want-
get rid of the thirds.
are there-
Yes.
100, so 2, 5, 10, 1, 100.
Yeah,
50,
limit-
20,
yes.
yeah,
25.
Is that a
Yes,
good,
that is good.
because basically it's 2, 5, 10, and then 20, 50.
and 4, it could be
4,
fours.
like 7, 12.
You know, that number, I've been teaching this stuff, that if you throw in the real tricky ones, which sometimes they will, like, I didn't see that one, because the kids, they think they got it, and then all of a sudden you throw in something like that, and they're like, thought I was understanding this. So you kind of have to build up that confidence first
Well, and I think that,
until it gels. And then, like you said, maybe sixth grade.
Right, do that.
and teachers can use those other pieces,
For the
Right.
more
but the,
accelerated
but
students.
it's the
you know, show them.
expectation is that students need to know this.
Mhm.
Right, so we have understand the relation between fractions, decimals, and percents, limited to denominators that are factors of 100, sorry. And then the first point, understand that parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents. Second is, given a value of less than 1, be able to express its equivalency as either a fraction, decimal, or a percent.
Now, does
Fifth grade, not go
either
over 100%.
limit us to one?
Do we-
Equivalency, you know what I'm saying? I mean, when I say either a fraction, decimal, or percent, I feel like I'm being limited to, I
Oh.
can only choose one of those.
Oh, so
Well,
so
actually, we have
express
more
its
down
equivalency as a fraction, decimal, or
Yeah,
percent.
yeah.
Or and. It shouldn't, maybe it should be or.
I think that's what they're talking about. to
So,
Okay.
all right, so we had a couple changes we were talking about here.
Two people making changes that
So,
I was just
Brad
You like
too.
my teacher
Brad
love.
caught it
What
too.
did you say?
Not the and, it's the and or or.
Yeah, so we said, given a value of less than 1, be able to express its equivalency as a fraction, decimal, and a percent.
And a percent, so you want them to do all three?
Well, they should be able to do all three.
Sure.
So all of them are ands, no ors in this.
Fifth grade.
Right.
Yeah.
All of them are ands.
Yes.
All right, so is there more on understanding the relationship here between fractions, decimals, and percents?
It sounds like a little thing, but that's a pretty big understanding for that.
Yeah, it's not a 1 or 2 day lesson.
What was that, what do you say?
He wanted to know if we needed anything else under here, but it seems like this is pretty.
Oh, it takes a while to do that. Yeah, that takes, it's a lengthy thing, that equivalency thing, when you go from fractions to decimals to percents.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of practice.
Okay, so then we're at perform operations.
It's saying it's really.
I say percent. Fraction, decimal, percent.
We wanted to make sure we included the estimation in this part at some point.
Well, we have that under operations.
I know, that's what I was talking about.
So we're moving on to the next thing.
I mean, so one of the key things, the first things is being able to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, is what they have in common before here, including mixed numbers by replacing given fractions with equivalent fractions in such a way as to produce an equivalent. I think it gets into too much explanation there. But, what's that?
So add and
Yeah,
subtract
yeah,
fractions
way
with
too much.
unlike denominators.
Well, maybe they did that just so they could kind of include the equivalent fraction thing, they just did it out of this. Take a lot of that out, because you
We're
already
putting including mixed numbers.
I don't think it should.
Yes.
Yeah, we-
It should. So how are we running
Add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators.
Including mixed numbers. It's 11:30. Let's see if we can knock this one out. All right. What else under this?
So then it's back to where we were a while ago with we wanted to emphasize in the context or with word problems or.
And again, I think that's one of our overarching principles is that students are going to do this in isolation and in context.
Yes.
So do we
Do we
wanna
write the standard?
put that highlighted same thing in that we put in? Not yet, but we just
So if we wanna, I'm sorry. No, I was just thinking out loud. So take that same solve problems, general statement, and just stick it under, just copy and paste it.
For right now,
With it
thinking that we
highlighted. With it
might
highlighted.
get the overarching principles to knock that out.
Okay. All right.
We need to put that by title.
Right now, we're at multiplying by a whole number.
This one will have a lot under it.
They like the multiplication
Oh, yeah.
and the division much better than they do the addition and subtraction of fraction, unlike denominators.
Well, then once you do multiplication and division, they try to apply the same rules to addition and
Addition and
subtraction.
subtraction, now it-
Now
So-
you're confusing me.
So, okay, so what is it that we're writing for multiply and divide?
oh. I'm looking for a way to word
Multiply and divide fractions, including mixed numbers.
Do you want to divide?
So Common Core and Standard apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication and division, multiply and divide fractions, sorry. The point 3 here. It says interpret a fraction as division of the numerator by the denominator. Are we already covering that in our, understand parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions? I mean, is that, because this is basically the same point, is understanding that a fraction is the same as a division problem.
oh,
And they specifically say that here, and I don't know if we need to specifically say that or.
Well, so you could get the decimal without dividing. I mean, you could have kids that would take 1/2 and think about that as 50% and then get a decimal from there.
Well, 1/2 is the same as 50 over 100, which is 5/10 or 100.
So you would think it would already be up in there, but I don't know.
Well, maybe under that first bullet, under number 1, understand that parts of a whole can be expressed as fractions, decimals, and percents. Maybe it needs to be like a sub-GLE, where we have an A or a B or whatever. Make that specific.
Including solving the problems.
Well, this one's, it's really just understanding that a fraction is the same as a division problem. And I don't know if you need to spell that out, or if you do. I mean, it seems like if you understand fractions, you understand that.
Yeah.
And so,
It's part of your teaching strategy.
Yeah.
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 You have to spell that out.
okay. Which, I mean, yeah, if we're requiring that, it kind of goes to the point we made yesterday about if we're requiring this and it entails this, you don't have to spell out this, right? And if we're requiring you to convert a fraction, and understanding, yeah, you could do it other ways, but if you're teaching students to convert,
One of the ways.
yes, you're most likely going to teach that. So,
Well, like you said, division, that could go right into that, what we said, the parts of a whole. But when you get into, I need to know what 1/3 of, 20 is. And then
Then that's for interpreting the product.
That's interpreting
that's
the product. If
another-
the of becomes a multiplication sign, we've got 20 over 1, you cross multiply, you take care of it. I mean, if it can be cross multiplied, or you get a mixed number or what. But that's multiplication of the fraction, I mean, understanding that, so that's gotta be its own thing.
right.
But division, like you said, can fall into parts of the whole.
Okay, so where
So
are
what
we?
about, okay, so I agree maybe that top sentence about interpreting, because we've taken care of that. But
Mhm.
solve word problems involving division of whole numbers leading to answers in the
That's
form
good.
of fractions.
When we get to word problems, yes.
Well,
So solve problems involving division of whole numbers leading to answers in the form of fractions.
and again, understanding that we're putting sort of as our overarching principle, students are gonna be able to do it given the numbers and given context. So I don't know that we need to necessarily put in word problems here,
Okay,
because that's the understanding.
then the next
But-
one is apply and extend, we don't want that,
But-
but multiplication of a fraction and a whole number by a fraction. Multiplication to multiply a fraction or a whole number by a fraction. See, I do think that this builds on what they're doing in verb and concrete within fractions, so we don't wanna create a gap. We really do want it cohesive with what they would be doing in fourth grade. And currently what we have is division of fraction by fraction is in sixth grade, but the division of a whole number by a fraction is in fifth grade. And multiplication of fraction and fraction and multiplication of fraction and two numbers.
I think we should think about it and take a break for lunch.
I second that. Anyone?
It seemed like we're kind of losing it.
Sure, all right. Save your documents. And, we wanna say 1 hour. So what's,
Long.
or do we wanna make it, since
45
we're leaving
minutes.
early today, do you wanna get your lunch and, can we bring it up here, are we allowed, or do you know what the rules are?
I don't
I
know.
think we probably need to step away for a
Step
little bit, but 30 or 45 minutes would be plenty, but I don't think we need a full hour.
12:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
If you're
I'm
done,
speaking.
come back up.
That's
and
my
since we're
opinion.
all
I
back,
was-
we can start.
We usually get 10, 15 minutes.
I heard they were making soup today, right?
Yeah.
We're used to eating in 20 minutes. If you want to know how a teacher can scarf down a
You guys
full
got-
meal.
you guys got a nap, you guys got
Yeah,
a
my
nap.
kids are email, eat,
You've already
and.
taken a nap,
So-
30 minutes, 45 minutes.
back
You
by
guys are gonna eat down
12:30.
there, I got your tickets are right here. Jerry, I have yours, pass them around, I guess.
You're so one
You feeling better today?
Yeah.
We'll just come up
Good.
and make those music.
I like your attitude there.
Start those on.
So we put you back up here?
Something last night.
No, I brought you.
Here's Jan, she could
I
ask.
don't think it matters.
Janet, here you go.
That would imply a lot of work while you're reading.
But stomach wasn't quite ready for it, huh?
Yeah.
So you can, while you're fixing me, I'll go down and get mine out.
My
No,
husband
I don't
always
see
says,
any.
stomach doesn't
Oh, here, James, I
realize
have
it's a
you.
stomach yet.
But I'm lost
Myra, you're
somewhere.
not here, though. I've got Audrey, Kimberly, and Bridget.
Well, you can be worried, because
I'll be
You're not gonna,
Yeah.
they don't check your ID, it's all good. I mean, as long as Brad doesn't have worries, then.
You're-